Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a revolutionary, an inventor, or some plucky Dickensian orphan with a hidden destiny. You're just another body, born into the bowels of the Industrial Revolution, poor, damp, and already behind on rent. You didn't choose this. No one ever chooses soot in their lungs and rats in their blankets. You simply opened your eyes one day to find that the world had changed. And somehow, every change made things worse for people like you. There are no great men in your story, just gears, smoke, and the distant sound of someone rich getting richer. So before your fingers get caught in the loom, or your dinner gives you dysentery again, leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I like to know who else is still awake while we quietly unravel the myths of human progress. And if you'd like early access to more slow, unsettling reminders that history was never kind, along with ad-free audio versions of these episodes, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Now lie back, breathe shallowly, and try not to cough. The air's not good tonight. Let's begin. You were born into progress. That's what they call it. The smoke, the metal, the endless mechanical groaning that vibrates through the walls, even as you're gasping your first breath. You don't know the word yet, but you already live in its shadow. Your first breath is damp. Your first cry ignored. Your first bed damp straw. You weren't planned, but then again, no one is. You arrive without ceremony, in a room that leaks from every seam and smells of sweat, soot and boiled cabbage. No one boils the rags. The midwife wipes her hands on her apron and moves on. Your mother doesn't get rest. She gets up. You don't get named right away, not because they don't care, but because they have done this before. You are small, pink, and already wrong. Not loud enough, not strong enough, not guaranteed. Everyone knows what the odds are. 1 in 5 won't live past the first year, and in this part of the city, the numbers climb. You are a liability, a gamble, another mouth in a home already full of coughing and hunger. If you're lucky, someone holds you. If you're not, someone props you up near the hearth and hopes the rats are busy elsewhere. Either way, the days start without you, and they do not wait. Your mother tries, but trying doesn't get her time off. She's bleeding through rags, her chest is raw, and her skin smells like coal dust and soap made from bones. You cry often. Sometimes she answers, sometimes she doesn't. There are other children in the room, and they cry too, and louder. When she leaves for work, but you're barely a week after birthing you, she hands you to your older sister, who's about 10 but looks 40. She keeps you alive in the way someone might keep a kettle from boiling over, distractedly, grimly, out of obligation. You lie in a corner on a pile of linens that once belonged to someone else's funeral, and you wait for someone to remember you. You're too young to understand what you're breathing, but your lungs do. The air outside is thick with soot, heavy with ash, always damp. The chimney across the alley exhales in clotted bursts, coating the window in a sticky black skin. You don't get clean air or clean water or even clean hands. You just get what's available. The water comes from a pump 3 streets down and turns the bottom of your cup brown. The milk is watered down and often warm. The bread is mostly chalk. The floor is usually wet. Your skin breaks out in rashes no one can name. You're not taken to a doctor. No one here is unless they're already dying. So remedies come from the cupboard. Gin for teething, lye soap for boils, prayer for everything else. You don't play, you exist. If you're given anything to occupy your hands, it's a wood chip, or a thimble, or a rat's tail, depending on the day. You chew on it. You swallow something you shouldn't. You vomit, and then you sleep. No one rushes to comfort you. Illness is expected, part of the fabric of life. People die from less all the time. Your father, if he's still around, barely speaks. He works, or drinks, or both. He doesn't hold you much, not out of cruelty. He just doesn't know how. Your home, if you can call it that, is one room with a ceiling low enough to slap, paper-thin walls, and a floor that creaks like it's warning you not to move too fast. You share it with 6, sometimes 8 others. The wallpaper peels in long, wet strips. The window doesn't open, or it opens too far and threatens to fall out. The fire doesn't always light. You sleep on a straw mattress that smells of mildew and feet. Sometimes you wake up with bites. Sometimes you wake up wheezing. No one is surprised by either. You learn not to cry too much. It doesn't bring help, just sighs or sharp words or silence. You learn to sit still, to stay quiet, to take up less space. When you wet the bed, your sister rolls you to the edge and changes the sheet underneath you without saying a word. When you cough, she doesn't look up unless it sounds different. There are a dozen kinds of coughs in this place, and everyone knows which ones mean death is coming. By the time you're 3, you're already learning what matters: warmth, scraps, staying out of the way. You mimic what you see, carrying buckets, scraping crumbs into piles, folding rags. Your body is small, but it's starting to understand pain. How cold makes your knuckles stiff. How hunger makes your stomach hollow. How noise makes your head hurt in ways you don't have words for yet. No one asks what you want to be when you grow up. That would require imagining a future. You are, in every practical sense, a burden. You don't earn, you don't contribute. You cost food, space, and time. And those are luxuries. Your parents love you, probably. But survival dulls the edge of affection. When someone says, "Bless the child," they mean, "God help us afford to feed another one." You're not the centre of their world. You're another orbiting object in a solar system that's already collapsing under its own weight. And yet, you live. Maybe it's luck. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe your cough isn't quite as bad as the neighbours. But for now, you wake up most mornings still breathing, still present, still cold. You've learned to chew stale bread slowly, to drink without gagging, to fall asleep despite the rats in the walls and the screaming in the stairwell. You've learned that sickness comes and goes, that bruises fade, and that the world will not pause for you to catch up. You're 5 years old. Your childhood, what little there was of it, is almost over. Soon someone will find you a job. Maybe you'll sweep floors in a factory. Maybe you'll carry coal. Maybe you'll be sent into a mine. It doesn't matter. The point is you're nearly old enough to stop being a burden and start being burned as fuel. Because this is the future. It's already here. And you are already behind. Congratulations. You survived long enough to be useful. That's the reward for making it past your 5th birthday. Not rest, not comfort, not play, but work. You're now part of the great machine. Not metaphorically, literally. You are a body small enough to fit where grown men can't. Under gears, between pistons, inside shafts where the oil pools and the belts don't stop turning just because someone's arm is in the way. Your job isn't to think, it's to reach, to clean, to fetch, to obey. There is no ceremony, no first day outfit. No one takes your picture. You wake up early, too early, and you are shoved into the cold with a crust of bread and the instruction not to be late. Your first job might be in a mill, where the air is so thick with lint that your snot turns white by mid-morning. Or it might be in a coal pit, where your job is to sit with a sharp stick and chase birds off the slag heaps. You are not given a choice. You are given a role, and you fill it until you grow, or break, or both. Your hands are raw within a week. Blisters turn into calluses, which split and bleed, and no one offers gloves. Gloves are for people whose hands matter. You're not paid in coins, at least not directly. Wages go to your parents, who use them to buy food, rent, candles, soap, and occasionally a few quiet minutes in a pub where they can forget they ever brought you into this world. You're told to be grateful. Plenty of children don't have jobs after all. Some starve, some steal, and end up in the workhouse. You, at least, have a place. The factory is hot in summer and freezing in winter. The windows are black with soot. You are not allowed to sit unless told. You are not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You are not allowed to bleed on the fabric, even if the needle goes through your thumb. The overseer doesn't hate you, necessarily. He just doesn't see you. To him, you're a moving part. He only notices when you slow down. Then comes the shouting, or the strap, or if he's in a mood, the back of his hand. You learn fast. You get faster, not better, just more efficient at avoiding pain. You work 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. On Sundays, you rest. Rest meaning you sit in a room that smells like boiled undergarments and listen to a priest tell you that suffering is a virtue and poverty is a test of faith. You try not to fidget. You try not to fall asleep. You try not to think about the pile of laundry waiting at home, or the shoe you've outgrown but still have to wear. Your feet bleed sometimes. You cut holes in the toes and keep walking. There is no school. That's for rich children, or the ones lucky enough to live near a charitable mission that hasn't run out of coal. You learn numbers from counting stitches or bundles or bricks. You learn letters by reading signs that say, "Keep out" or "No loitering." You can't spell your last name, but you know how many hours you have to work to buy a loaf of bread. That's education enough. Your friends, if you can call them that, are other children who haven't died yet. You share scraps with them. You share bruises. You share secrets, mostly made up. There's a boy with no front teeth who says his father works for the Queen. There's a girl with one eye who claims she once rode a horse. You nod. You believe them because the truth would be worse. You learn how to laugh without joy, to cry without sound, to disappear in a crowd even when you're still standing in the middle of it. You get sick, of course you do. Everyone does. The factory doctor comes once a month. He carries a clipboard and doesn't touch anyone. If you collapse, they drag you outside and pour cold water on you. If you don't get back up, they send for your family. If your family can't afford the time off, they send for a priest. One boy caught his sleeve in the loom and left the floor in pieces. They said it was his fault. You said nothing. You looked at your own sleeves and rolled them tighter. You stopped growing. Your legs are thin, your chest hollow. Your spine curls inward like it's trying to get away. You're shorter than you should be. That's normal. Malnourishment stunts you, and no one is surprised. You're not built to last, just to function. Your teeth rot, your ears ring. Your vision blurs from too many hours in dim light. You develop a cough that never quite goes away. When you spit, it's black. The house hasn't changed. Still damp, still crowded, still echoing with footsteps and shouting and the occasional slap. You've gotten better at staying out of the way. You're strong enough now to carry coal, to fetch water, to hold your baby brother while your mother stares blankly at the wall. You've seen her cry twice. Once when your father didn't come home, and once when he did. You don't know which scared you more. You've also learned what not to touch. The red wire, the glowing metal, the cupboard with the rat poison. You know how to tell the difference between a rat bite and a wire burn by feel, not sight. Rat bite is swell more. Burns blister and split. You've had both. You've stopped telling people when you're hurt. The worst thing in a house like this isn't injury. It's becoming a problem. Problems get replaced. You dream sometimes. Not of a better life. You're not that naive. But of silence. Of sleep that lasts longer than a few hours. Of food you don't have to chew slowly, so it doesn't hurt your jaw. You dream of grass, though you've never walked on any. You've seen it in pictures, on tin signs advertising medicines you'll never take. In the dream, it's soft. When you wake up, the floor is still cold and splintered beneath your toes. And still, you keep going. Because there's nothing else to do. Because if you don't, someone else will. There are always more children, always more desperate families, always more machines. You are not special. You are not brave. You are a child in the age of industry, which means you are not really a child at all. You are a tool, and tools are used until they break. You don't remember when work stopped being something you did and started being something you are. It happened slowly, and then all at once. One day, you were just a child running errands and holding tools. The next, you were a full-time extension of a machine that doesn't care whether you're rested, ready, or even human. The transition isn't marked by a birthday or a promotion. It's marked by silence. No one congratulates you. No one tells you you've grown. They just start expecting you to endure things that used to break you. Your job owns you now. It wakes you before dawn and drags you into a room where everything is loud, sharp, and moving too fast. You're in a factory, or a mine, or a place with a name that sounds almost innocent, like works or yard or shed. But behind the name is heat and noise and the constant threat of mutilation. Maybe it's a textile mill, where you feed threads into machines that clatter and spin faster than your eyes can track. Maybe it's a coal mine where you crawl through shafts too narrow to stand in, dragging your tools like a dog chained to a plough. Maybe it's a matchstick factory, where the air smells sweet until your teeth begin to fall out, loosened by phosphorus and rot. You arrive before the sun is up and leave after it's down. Most days you don't see the sky. You forget what your neighbourhood looks like in daylight. The world has become two places, the inside of the factory and the exhausted darkness you return to at night. Time loses shape. The hours blur into a smear of orders, smoke, aches and noise. You eat when told. You stop when told. You hold your breath when the air turns foul, and you pray the fumes don't catch fire. There is no such thing as safety protocol. There is only, don't get in the way. The machines are always running. That's the rule. If one stops, someone has to explain why, and explanations cost money. So when a thread snaps or a belt jams, it's your job to fix it while it's still moving. You've seen what happens when someone's hand gets caught. Sometimes they pull away in time. Sometimes they don't. Either way, the machine doesn't stop. Neither does the shift. You wrap a rag around the stump and keep working. There's a boy in your row who lost 3 fingers last week. They paid him for 2 days and replaced him the 3rd. He's still around, sweeping now. He doesn't talk much anymore. The floor is never clean. In the mills, it's thick with lint and oil. In the mines, it's sludge. You've slipped more times than you can count, and every fall risks something. A twisted ankle, a broken wrist, a cracked skull. You don't report injuries unless they're impossible to hide. Complaining is a good way to get noticed, and getting noticed is a good way to lose your job. You learn to bandage yourself with scraps, to walk with a limp that doesn't draw attention, to clench your jaw when the pain spikes so hard it feels like your bones are splitting. You also learn how to help others quietly, quickly, in ways that won't slow the line. Everyone helps each other like that, not out of kindness, but because you might be next. There's no uniform, just rules. Don't wear anything loose. Don't fall behind. Don't stop moving. Some people tie their hair back so tight it pulls at the scalp. Others shave their heads entirely. One girl in your lane caught her braid in a bobbin and was scalped so fast she didn't scream until she hit the floor. She was 13. They dragged her out by the ankles and mopped the blood with sawdust. Her replacement arrived the next day, a cousin, maybe a sister. No one asked. The air hurts to breathe. In the mills, it's full of cotton dust that clings to your throat and settles in your lungs like wet ash. In the mines, it's heavy with coal particles and the damp stink of human closeness. In the match factory, it smells like rotten sugar, sweet enough to make your stomach turn. After a few months, you develop a cough that never really leaves. You wheeze in your sleep. Your spit turns black, or green or rust-coloured. You see a man spit blood onto his glove, wipe it off, and keep working. You do the same when it happens to you. It's nothing. It's always nothing, until it isn't. Your hearing fades in stages, the poundings, the clanking, the shrieking belts. At first it's overwhelming, then it becomes background, and finally it becomes silence. Not real silence, but a dullness, a pressure in your ears like they've been stuffed with cloth. You stop noticing when people speak behind you. You miss instructions and get hit for it. Eventually, you learn to watch mouths, to guess from gestures, to nod whether you understand or not. You hear impulses, not words. The factory has taken your sound. You don't get it back. You lose friends. Some leave, some vanish, some are crushed, some are buried. One slips under a cart, one gets locked in a coal chute and found 2 days later. One simply stops coming, and no one dares to ask why. The foreman shrugs. Moved on, he says. You know what that means. Everyone does. There's a part of you that hopes they're still alive, but that part gets quieter every year. You stop learning names. You stop telling your own. Your body begins to wear out. You're not even 20, but your back is bent, your wrists ache constantly, and your knees crack when you walk. You haven't grown in years. Your clothes still fit, but that's not a sign of youth. It's a sign of malnutrition. You're smaller than you should be. Your muscles are wiry, but your bones feel hollow. When you touch your ribs, they stick out like a ladder someone forgot to pull back in. You used to be tired. Now you're just slow. There are no benefits, no pensions, no fallback plans. If you're injured, you're replaced. If you're sick, you're replaced. If you ask for help, you're labelled difficult. You've seen it happen. Someone gets too bold, and suddenly there's no work available for them anymore. The message is clear. Keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your limbs inside the danger zone. You have a job, and that's more than many. That's what people say anyway. That's what your father said when he handed you a set of boots with holes in the soles and told you to be grateful. You think about that sometimes, about the way people tell you you're lucky just because you haven't died yet. As if survival is the same thing as success. As if standing at the edge of a furnace and not falling in makes you worthy of praise. You are a machine part now. You hum when they tell you to. You grind when the pressure builds. You spark when you're pushed too far. And when you break, they will not fix you. They will replace you. And the machine will keep going. And someone else will wear your number, your shirt, your silence. Because you were never meant to last. You were only ever meant to function. Home is not rest, it's not comfort. It's not safety. It's just where you go when you're too tired to keep standing. You drag your body there each night on legs that don't bend quite right anymore. Down streets that smell like piss, ash and desperation. The gas lamps flicker overhead, not bright enough to show the holes in the road, but just enough to catch the glint of rats scuttling between the cobblestones. You know every crack in the walkway by feel. You've stumbled over the same loose stones so many times, your foot just learns to adjust. You don't think about it. You don't think about anything. Not until you're inside. The building leans slightly to one side. Not enough to collapse, just enough to remind you that one day it might. The front door sticks, the stairs creak, the banister is missing a rail, and smells of sweat and stale gin. You don't bother looking around when you enter. You already know who'll be there, everyone. 10, maybe 12 people, depending on who's managed to pay rent this week. They're packed into a space that was designed for 4 and hasn't been cleaned properly since it was built. You're not sure what colour the walls are meant to be. The current shade is a streaked bruised grey, interrupted by patches of black mould in the corners and long strips of peeling wallpaper that curl like dead skin. You step over a sleeping body near the door. Might be your brother, might be the lodger, might be someone's cousin no one asked about. You don't need to know. You just need to find your spot. There's no bedroom, just a room. One room. If you're lucky, you get a place on the mattress. If you're unlucky, you get the floor. If you're very unlucky, you get the section near the leaking pipe, where the wood is soft and smells like something rotting beneath it. The bed itself is stuffed with straw and broken promises. It dips in the middle like it's trying to swallow you whole. It is always damp. Always. You sleep in your clothes. Everyone does. Changing is a luxury that requires time, privacy, and something else to put on. You stopped expecting clean clothing sometime around age 8. Now you just air things out when the weather's good, or scrape them against the stone if something soaks through. Your boots go under your head at night, not because they're a pillow, but because if you don't sleep on them, someone else might take them. That's happened before, more than once. There's no heat unless someone has managed to steal coal or chip a few crusts off the communal fire. Most nights, the cold settles into your spine like a second body. You curl up around yourself, or someone else, or both. No one comments. Warmth trumps dignity. You share lice, you share blankets, you share dreams, usually bad ones. Someone always snores. Someone always cries in their sleep. You learn to stop noticing. The walls are thin, not in the poetic sense, in the literal, structural sense. You hear everything. Footsteps from the apartment above, coughs from the one below, the sounds of furniture being shoved, people yelling, doors slamming, things breaking, things not breaking but wishing they would. And then, worse than noise, silence, long, tense stretches of it. You know the kind that comes before someone is hit, the kind that follows the thud, the kind that makes you hold your breath and hope it ends with shouting, not something heavier. You get privacy only in the form of collective neglect. No one watches you because no one has the energy. People bathe in the corner, behind a drape that doesn't fully close. People cry with their faces turned toward the wall. People argue in whispers. They think are quiet but aren't. You learn everyone's business whether you want to or not. Who's behind on rent? Who might be pregnant? Who owes money to someone worse than the landlord? And you learn what not to repeat. That too is survival. The toilet, if there is one, is outside. Shared, cracked and perpetually occupied. On bad days you use a bucket. On worse days, you use the alley. You've seen worse in the street anyway. Waste runs in channels between buildings. The rain helps sometimes, but not always. You've seen children splash in puddles you wouldn't step over. You've seen dogs drink from them. You've seen people drink from them. The smell never leaves. Not the air, not your body, not your food. It's in everything. A sour, heavy mix of mildew, coal smoke, boiled onions, and human rot. You try not to notice because noticing makes it worse. You stop smelling it after a while, or rather, you stop noticing how bad you smell until you go somewhere else. Not that you often do, but once, years ago, you walked past a bakery on the good side of town and smelled butter. Real butter. It nearly made you cry. There's no furniture worth mentioning. A table, some crates, a few chairs all mismatched and unstable. The table's warped, the chairs wobble. The ceiling has a crack that widens every winter. Someone tried to patch it with paper once. Now it just flutters when the wind sneaks in. Nothing is level. Everything leans. You do too. And yet, for all its filth and noise and overcrowding, you cling to this place. Because this is your only space. Your only piece of the city that's even partially yours. It's where you keep your tin cup, your crusts, your broken comb, your blanket. It's where your mother sometimes hums when she's not coughing, and where your brother once drew a flower on the wall in charcoal and no one scrubbed it off. It's where you learn to sleep sitting up and to recognise the sound of a mouse versus a cockroach without opening your eyes. It's the only place that doesn't look at you like you're something to be replaced. It's not a home in the romantic sense, it's a station, a checkpoint, a hole to collapse into between shifts. It doesn't keep you safe, it doesn't keep you clean, but it keeps you, barely, and that somehow is enough. Food isn't nourishment, it's risk management, it's damage control. It's the daily wager between eating what you have and regretting it later, or not eating and regretting it sooner. Hunger isn't something that comes and goes. It's a baseline, a low, gnawing ache behind your ribs that you've learned to ignore, like the smell of sewage in the streets or the sound of coughing through the walls. You're always hungry. You just don't always admit it. Bread is the staple, not because it's good, but because it's available. The cheapest loaves are bulked out with sawdust, ground chalk, or alum, a chemical that tightens your mouth and burns your throat, but makes the crust look less like something scraped off a boot. You eat it anyway. You soak it in weak tea or watery broth, whatever you can find. Sometimes it goes stale before it reaches your hands. Sometimes it's mouldy. You eat it faster when you hear rats nearby, not because you're hungry, though you are, but because if you don't finish it quickly, something else will. Milk is a luxury item, and when you get it, it's almost always a disappointment. It's been diluted twice before it reaches your cup and kept somewhere warm long enough to develop personality. You drink it anyway, carefully, nose turned away. It's better than nothing, and better than water, which is its own kind of threat. The city pump is contaminated. Everyone knows that. The water tastes metallic and smells like a dying animal, but it's wet, and sometimes that's all that matters. You try not to think about where it comes from. You try not to think about where it's been. You try not to think about the neighbour who dropped dead last week with blackened lips and a bucket still in his hand. Tea, when you have it, is brewed so weak it could be mistaken for dirty water, which it often is. Sugar is scarce. Milk, as mentioned, is suspect. The cup you drink from may be chipped, may be cracked, may be lined with lead, but no one knows that yet. All you know is that sometimes your teeth ache after tea, and sometimes your gums bleed. You assume it's normal. You assume everything is. Meat is rare. If you get any, it's usually offcuts. Gristle, fat, organs, the bits no one else wants. You chew for a long time, sometimes too long. The texture fights back. The colour isn't right. The smell is metallic, faintly sour, like something left in the sun. You don't ask questions. If it's cooked, it's good enough. If it's not, you scrape off the worst and hope the heat from your hands is enough to warm it. You've seen people eat things that made your stomach turn. You've been those people. Fish is worse. In theory, it should be fresh. In practice, it's half rotted by the time it hits the pan. Cheap cuts wrapped in newspaper, fried in lard that's been reused too many times, served with vinegar strong enough to kill taste buds. It fills your stomach. It also sends you running to the outhouse within the hour. You've had food poisoning so many times, you no longer bother giving it a name. It's just another part of the week. Eggs are fragile currency. When they're good, they're soft, warm, and gone too quickly. When they're bad, they're unforgettable. You've cracked one open to find a black sludge inside. You've eaten one that tasted like sulphur and old cloth. Sometimes you can't tell whether it's the food that's bad or your stomach that's giving up. Either way, you finish what's on your plate. Leaving food behind is a sin. Not a moral one, a practical one. You can't afford regret. You can't afford leftovers. Vegetables are seasonal, which means you get them rotten in winter and worm-eaten in summer. A cabbage here, a turnip there, potatoes when the harvest is good. When it's not, you get sprouted ones with green skin and a bitter flavour that lingers for hours. You boil them until they disintegrate, then spoon the mush into your mouth and pretend it's soup. You eat quietly, quickly. You eat with your elbows out and your head down. It's not just about hunger, it's about competition. You're not the only one at the table. And then there's the matter of hands. Who touched your food? How recently they wiped their nose? Whether they washed at all? Most don't. Soap is expensive. Water is unreliable. Hygiene is a theory, not a practice. You don't think about germs. You don't know the word. You just know that some meals leave you bent double on the floor, stomach clenching, mouth dry, praying for the pain to pass before your shift starts. You know diarrhea like other people know prayer. It's familiar, repetitive, and entirely ineffective. Sometimes you skip meals, not because you want to, but because the food isn't there. You drink instead. Weak tea, cloudy water, anything to trick your stomach into feeling full. Hunger gives you headaches. It makes you slow. It makes your hands tremble when you reach for tools. You can't afford that. You eat crumbs from under the table. You eat crusts someone else left behind. You eat things you wouldn't describe out loud, not even to yourself. There are rumours about what's in the sausages, about the colour of the butcher's floor, about the sound the meat makes when it's ground. You don't ask questions. You eat it anyway, because hunger is louder than suspicion, and because the worst thing food can do is kill you, which frankly, at this point, wouldn't be the most painful option on the table. You fall in love, or maybe you don't. That part's optional, the rest isn't. Sooner or later, you end up paired off, not because of romance, not because of some grand, sweeping gesture, but because rent is cheaper when there are two of you. 2 incomes. 1 bed. It's simple arithmetic. You meet someone in your building, or on your shift, or through a cousin who swears they're not that bad. You don't have time to be picky. You don't have space to be alone. And you don't have the luxury of waiting until you feel something. Love, as it turns out, is a privilege for people who can afford to waste time. At first, there's a kind of comfort in the routine of it. You share food, you trade shifts to watch each other's siblings, you lie back to back on a mattress that sags like a broken ribcage, and pretend the warmth means something more than shared exhaustion. It's not happiness, but it's quieter than being alone. Sometimes you talk in the dark, whispering about things you almost remember wanting. Sometimes you don't talk at all. The silence is just as intimate and far less disappointing. Sex is fast, quiet, mechanical. There's no room for passion, no privacy, no luxury of time. You try to be discreet, but the walls are thin and the bed creaks. And there's always someone snoring a few feet away or pretending to sleep while listening. You don't expect fireworks. You don't even expect pleasure. You expect function. You expect repetition. You expect a pause at the end where you both turn over and try not to think about what comes next. Pregnancy, when it happens, is rarely a surprise. Birth control is a myth or a joke, depending on who you ask. Some women choose certain herbs, others drink mixtures that promise to bring on late flow, but mostly just make them vomit. Some just pray. It doesn't matter. If your body decides to grow a child, that's it. You're having one. Or you're not. Or you're starting to, and then you're bleeding in a back room with no midwife and no pain relief. And afterward, no one talks about it. For some, it's a child. For others, it's a funeral. Often, it's both. Babies don't last long here. They're born small, sickly, unfinished. They struggle to breathe in rooms where even adults wheeze. They drink milk that's thin and dirty. They lie in cradles beside mouldy walls. You try not to get attached too quickly. You give them names, yes, but quietly, like you're not sure they'll stick. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes the name outlives the child by days. When the baby dies, there's no mourning period. There's barely an afternoon. The laundry still needs scrubbing. The rent is still due. Your shift doesn't change just because your world did. You go back to work with swollen eyes and milk leaking into your blouse, and no one says a word. If you're lucky, someone nods at you on the way in. If you're not, someone says, "Try again soon." It's what they're for. You pretend not to hear. You pretend it doesn't sting. When a wife dies, it's harder. Not because anyone cares more, but because it leaves a logistical gap. A man without a wife loses more than company. He loses laundry, meals, childcare. So after the body's taken out, after the neighbours murmur their obligatory blessings, the questions begin. Who'll take care of the baby? Who'll mind the house? Who'll cook, clean, watch, listen, absorb? There's no time for grief. There's a hole to patch. Widowers remarry quickly. Widows, if they survive, remarry faster. Sometimes both mother and baby die. Sometimes it happens so fast there's barely time to scream. Sometimes the room fills with blood so thick it stains the floor for weeks. You walk around it because there's no other place to sleep. You stop seeing it after a while. Or maybe you never did. It's hard to say. The walls are still the same. The air still stinks. The rats still scratch behind the stove. And the room still hums with the quiet, heavy weight of things no one says out loud. Love is not the centre of your story. It's not even a chapter. It's a footnote, a brief sentence between shifts, tucked under a pile of debts and rags, and unmet glances in the dark. You might love the person you lie next to. You might not. You might hate them sometimes, or fear them, or wish they'd go away, but you stay. Because it's better than sleeping alone on the floor. Because there's a child between you. Or there was. Or you hope there will be again. There are moments, rare, flickering, where affection slips through. A calloused hand brushing your cheek. a laugh shared over something stupid, a night where the fire stays lit and the silence feels almost kind. You hold on to those moments like splinters in the skin. They ache when you move, but you don't pull them out. They're proof something happened, something mattered. But most of the time, love is just another task, another mouth, another weight, another reason to get up in the morning and haul water, wipe noses, scrub floors. You don't sing love songs, you hum lullabies. You don't write letters, you fold laundry. You don't hold hands, you hold children. When they die, you bury them quietly, in borrowed graves wrapped in rags with no one watching. Then you go back to work. Death is not rare, it is not dramatic. It is not something that waits patiently at the end of a long life. It is constant, present, and unremarkable. It hangs in the corners of your room, clings to the coughing in your lungs, follows you down narrow alleyways slick with waste. It's not some distant spectre. It's a neighbour, a co-worker, a regular. You see it often enough that you stop reacting. Shock is a luxury, and you've already spent it. You might die from disease. Most do. The list is long and familiar. Typhoid, diphtheria, scarlet fever, consumption, cholera. You've seen all of them, though you probably don't know their names. You just know what they look like. Skin gone pale and yellow, eyes sunken, limbs thin and twitching, a fever that won't break, a cough that never stops. You've seen a child's mouth go blue in winter and never turn back. You've seen someone sweat themselves into silence in the middle of the night, shaking so hard the mattress thumped against the floorboards. You've held a hand that went cold mid-sentence. Some illnesses come suddenly, others linger. Either way, help is scarce. Doctors are for the rich. For you, there's vinegar and prayer. Maybe a neighbour who knows how to mix herbs. You drink water that's probably poisoned. You sleep beside people who are already sick. You cough into the same blanket every night. You share germs the way others share greetings. No one washes their hands. No one sanitizes tools. When someone dies, the body is carried out the same door you use to fetch coal, and the space they leave behind is filled by mourning. Injuries are just as dangerous. A broken bone means weeks of uselessness, weeks without pay, weeks of becoming someone else's problem. You hide sprains, you ignore deep cuts, you wrap fabric around bleeding limbs, and go back to work because stopping isn't an option. You've seen people bleed to death in minutes. You've seen someone trip and crack their skull on a factory floor and be dragged away like a sack of flour. You once saw a man lose half his foot under a wagon. He screamed, then didn't. They cleaned the blood with sawdust. The wagon didn't stop rolling. Tetanus creeps in through small wounds, the kind you don't even remember getting. One day your jaw feels tight. The next day, your whole body locks. You die stiff, bent and gasping. Gangrene follows bad luck and worse bandages. You feel it start as a warmth, then a smell, then a rot so vivid the people around you begin to back away before you even speak. By the time someone considers cutting off the limb, it's already too late. You are the infection. You are the source. And everyone knows what that means. Accidents happen everywhere. You slip into a canal after too much gin. You fall asleep too close to a stove and wake up on fire. You inhale gas from a broken pipe. You're kicked in the head by a horse you didn't see coming. You vanish between freight cars. You drown in the public bathhouse when no one's looking. There's nothing cinematic about it. No last words, no warnings. One moment you're there, the next you're not. And the world keeps moving. When someone dies, the process is swift. There's no wake, no procession, no weeping violin by candlelight. There's a body, a cart, a shallow hole in a crowded cemetery where the dirt has been turned so many times that bones poke through like weeds. If there's a priest, he mumbles. If there's a marker, it's wood and won't last the winter. Some people don't even get that. They're buried in mass graves, covered by the bodies that come next. There is always a next. If you're lucky, you die in your bed. If you're unlucky, You die somewhere public, and your face is still twisted with effort when the boys find you and point and laugh because that's how they deal with the smell. If you're truly unlucky, you don't die at all. Not right away. You suffer. You linger. You cost your family time, money, patience. They love you, but only as much as they can afford to. After a certain point, it's simpler if you go. Sometimes death doesn't even register. You see the space on the floor where someone used to sleep and only realise they're gone a few days later. You ask someone, they shrug. Off to the country, they say, or hospital, or don't know. You nod, you don't press. Pressing is a waste of energy. Whatever happened, it's done. Whatever comes next, it won't be better. Burial is supposed to bring closure. But closure isn't a concept that means much when you're just trying to stay fed. There's no mourning period. There's not even time off work. You show up the next day. You keep your head down. If your eyes are red, people pretend not to notice. If your clothes are still stained, you stand in the back until the fabric dries. Life continues. It has to. There's rent. There's coal. There's laundry. There's always something that needs doing. And then there's the real fear, that you won't be buried at all, that your death will come during an outbreak, when the dead are stacked like firewood and the gravediggers stop counting. You'll be wrapped in a sheet and hauled away on a wagon that smells like every other wagon in the district. You won't get a name. You'll get a number, maybe. A trench, definitely. If the cholera's bad enough, they won't even bother with a prayer. Just lime, shovels and silence. You don't hope for a long life. You hope for a quick death. Clean, painless, invisible. You don't get to choose how you live. You don't get to choose how you die. But maybe, just maybe, you get to avoid the worst of it. Maybe you get to die before the rot sets in. Maybe you get to die before the people around you start to look at your body as something in the way. You'd like to think you'll be remembered. But you won't be. Not for long. People forget quickly here. Because if they don't, they break. You don't breathe clean air. You breathe smoke. You breathe fog that isn't really fog. Just soot suspended in dampness. You breathe the exhale of 1,000 chimneys. The exhaust of industry. The breath of the machine that never sleeps. You breathe because you have to, but each breath is a small act of surrender. You can feel it inside you, the way your chest tightens after walking a block, the way your throat scratches when you speak, the way your spit darkens as the day goes on. It doesn't matter how young you are. The city is older, the city is sicker, and it's rubbing off on you. The air hangs heavy, especially in the mornings, when the fog sits low and doesn't move. It crawls into your mouth and nose like a living thing. The smell is impossible to describe if you haven't lived in it. Acrid, wet, slightly metallic, like rust mixed with vinegar. You try to ignore it, but it sticks to your clothes, to your hair, to the inside of your teeth. When you blow your nose, the handkerchief comes back black. You stop using handkerchiefs. It's easier to wipe your face on your sleeve and pretend it's not that bad. Your lungs rattle now. Not sometimes. Always. A faint wheeze that turns into a hacking cough if you try to climb stairs too fast. You're not old enough to be this weak, but weakness doesn't care about your age. You wake up coughing, you fall asleep coughing. It's how you mark time. You've learned to distinguish between the different kinds of coughs. The dry one that means dust, the wet one that means infection, the deep shaking one that means something worse is coming. You hear them all the time, through walls, through floorboards, in your own chest. The rivers are no better. Once they carried fish and trade and clear water. Now they carry dye from the mills, sewage from the tenements, and the occasional body that no one wants to claim. The surface ripples with oil slicks. It smells worse in summer, when the heat stirs everything up and the stench drifts through the windows. You see children playing near the banks, throwing stones into water that could kill them. You want to tell them to stop, but you don't. You did the same thing when you were their age. You lived, mostly. People talk about miasma. They say the air is poisoned, not with particles because they don't know what that means, but with badness, with invisible rot, with evil vapours. They aren't wrong exactly. They're just missing the parts where the poison has a source. The factories, the furnaces, the chimneys that line the horizon like a row of broken teeth. No one questions the chimneys. The chimneys mean jobs. The chimneys mean progress. If the price is a little coughing, so be it. There are no regulations, no inspectors, no limits. A factory can belch filth into the street for 16 hours a day, and no one says a word unless the neighbours start dropping too fast. Then someone blames the local bakery or the pump at the end of the street. They blame the poor hygiene of the people who died. They blame foreigners, or bad meat, or the weather. They never blame the smoke. The smoke pays the rent. You hear rumours of clean air, farther out, past the city, places where trees still stand, and birds still sing, and you can breathe without feeling like you're swallowing sand. You've never been there. You probably never will. Those places are for other people. People with money. People who don't live 3 to a bed in rooms where the wallpaper melts off the walls during humid months. People who can afford to leave the city and to return with their lungs intact. The children get sick first, always. Their chests are smaller, their bones thinner. You watch them grow pale, then grey, then still. Their faces turn ashen not just from sickness, but from what surrounds them. The smoke that filters in through the cracks, the soot that settles in the folds of their clothes, the constant breathless wheeze of life, lived in an unventilated room above a factory boiler. No one is surprised anymore when a child doesn't wake up. The only surprise is how often they do. There's a kind of resignation that sets in, a quiet understanding that this is how it works. This is how it always works. You can scrub the walls. You can hang damp rags in the windows to catch the worst of the dust. You can cough into cloth, breathe through your sleeve, boil the water, close the shutters. None of it matters. The air gets in. The air always gets in. Every once in a while someone leaves. A cousin, a neighbour. They find work out in the country. They come back after a few months, cleaner, brighter, standing straighter. They say the air is different out there, that it smells like earth, like grass, like rain. You listen, you nod, you tell yourself you'll leave too. Someday, you won't. Not because you don't want to, but because you can't. You are built into this place now, layered in smoke, etched in soot. They write poems about fog, about misty mornings, and the beauty of smoke curling through the air like silk. You don't see poetry, you see disease, you see death, you see another morning where your chest feels tight and your nose is bleeding and the sky is the same sick shade of yellow. It was yesterday. The fog isn't romantic, it's lethal, and no one does anything because doing something would mean admitting it's a problem. And if it's a problem, someone might have to fix it. And no one wants that. You keep breathing. You have no choice. You inhale death with every breath. And it doesn't even feel strange anymore. It feels normal. It feels expected. It feels like progress. The factory owner wears a top hat and lectures on hard work. You own a pair of boots and a cough. That's the difference. He talks about industry, about merit, about pulling yourself up with your bootstraps. And you try not to laugh, because your boots don't have straps. They barely have soles. And besides, you're too tired to laugh. He stands on a platform with clean gloves and polished shoes, and tells a crowd of men who haven't had a day off in years that the future belongs to the determined. You stand in the back, dirt under your fingernails, fingers still raw from the loom, and wonder what kind of determination you're supposed to invent that could buy you an extra loaf of bread. You work harder than he does. Everyone knows that. You work longer hours in worse conditions for less pay. And yet he earns more in a day than you do in a month. His name is printed in newspapers, attached to charities and new rail lines and education boards. Your name is on a punch card or a list of tenants behind on rent. His hands are soft, yours are scarred. He sleeps through the night. You wake up coughing. He builds museums. You build chimneys, and neither of you would last 5 minutes in the other's world. though only one of you would die from it. They say the system is broken, but you know better. It's not broken, it's just not built for you. The gears are turning exactly as they're meant to. The profits go up, the wages stay down, and the people at the bottom don't get crushed by accident. They're the foundation. Every improvement that's supposed to help you ends up helping someone else. They invent new machines, and you lose your job. They open a school, and your hours get longer so you can afford to send your child there. Not that they're ever home long enough to study. The progress is real. It's just not yours. You've heard words like innovation and reform tossed around by people who've never skipped a meal. They write reports about conditions in the slums and call them unacceptable. Then they close the report and move on. You're still here. You're still sleeping next to a cracked wall and stepping over puddles of piss in the stairwell. You're still lining up at dawn for bread that might be stale or poisoned or simply not there. No one asks what you think about these reforms. No one asks if they helped. There's a school nearby, not for your children, but for theirs. It has windows, books, a yard. You've seen boys in pressed jackets laughing behind the gate. You've seen girls with ribbons in their hair walking to piano lessons while you carry buckets of coal past them. You're not jealous, you're realistic. That life was never meant for you. Your child will never wear those ribbons. Your son will never play cricket in that yard. He'll be down the road, covered in soot, coughing into his sleeve. Every now and then, someone from the other side comes to visit. A philanthropist, a reformer, a well-meaning woman in white gloves who wants to see how the poor live. She walks through the alley like she's on safari. She gasps at the smell. She makes a note about the children with bare feet. She hands out a few coins and tells you she'll pray for you. Then she leaves, and the alley returns to what it was. Wet, crowded, forgotten. You tell yourself not to be bitter, but it's hard not to wonder what her prayers are supposed to fix. Charity doesn't reach everyone. It barely reaches anyone. There are soup kitchens sometimes. Lines of thin men standing quietly for a bowl of broth and a scrap of bread. You've stood in that line. You've watched the pot run out 3 people ahead of you. You've walked home hungry because someone else was hungrier. There's no shame in it anymore. Just numbers. Math who got there first. Who had enough energy to stand upright longer. Who got lucky. You've seen people try to climb out. They save every coin, skip every meal, dream big. They talk about moving to the country, starting fresh, buying land. Some even make it as far as the edge of the city. Then the job falls through, or someone gets sick, or the landlord raises the rent. And they come back, thinner, quieter, no longer full of plans. They don't speak as much after that. They just nod when someone else starts talking about getting out. And they look away. You are not lazy, you are not weak, you are not unworthy. You are simply stuck in a system that requires someone to be beneath. And you are beneath. You always have been. You were born closer to the gutter than the door. And every year you've clawed a little higher, only to realise the ladder was bolted to the ground. You don't move up. You just move in place, maybe sideways if you're lucky. Maybe not. Sometimes they hold elections. Men in suits knock on doors and talk about change. You nod, you take the flyer, you fold it up and put it in the drawer with the others. It doesn't matter who wins. The mill still opens at 6. The rent still climbs. The air still chokes. You still owe more than you earn. And the men in suits stop knocking once the votes are counted. There's no revolution brewing. Not really. People are too tired, too hungry, too scared of losing what little they have. You whisper about unfairness, maybe. You mutter in corners. But mostly, you just keep going. Because that's what you've been taught. Keep your head down. Keep working. Keep breathing, even when the air feels sharp. Maybe if you do everything right, your children will have it better. That's the lie you hold on to. It's not much, but it's enough to keep you upright. And so, the rich stay rich, the poor stay poor. And progress marches on, oblivious to the bodies it steps over on the way. Maybe you try to fight back, not at first, At first, you're just trying to survive, to keep your job, keep your room, keep your bones intact. But eventually, something snaps. Maybe it's the fifth friend you've lost to a preventable injury. Maybe it's your child coughing up blood. Maybe it's the landlord raising the rent again, while the ceiling still leaks and the mould keeps spreading. One day you wake up and realise the system won't fix itself. So you sign your name to something. You stand in a circle. You whisper with others. You decide, quietly, to resist. You join a union or something like it, a group of workers who've had enough. You meet after shifts, in alleyways, basements, back rooms of pubs. Someone knows how to read and reads out the demands. Less hours, better pay, a break for lunch that's longer than 15 minutes. A doctor who doesn't charge half a week's wages just to tell you you're dying. It all sounds reasonable, human, necessary. You look around at the faces beside you, and for once you don't feel alone. You feel dangerous. That feeling won't last. The next day, the foreman's gaze lingers on you longer than it used to. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. You've already been marked. 2 others are fired by week's end. No explanation, just work's dried up. You're warned not to speak out, not to stir trouble. You're told you should be grateful you have a job at all. Then the rumours start that you're a troublemaker, that you're lazy, that you're putting everyone else's wages at risk. Your co-workers avoid you now. They still agree with you. They just don't want to be next. You consider striking. Not just you, the whole factory. It's been done before. You've heard stories. Men walking out in unison. Demands met. Conditions improved. But those stories never include the other parts. The ones who are beaten, or blacklisted, or starved into crawling back. The factory doesn't care if you strike. It has a dozen others waiting to take your place. New immigrants, desperate men, children. If you stop working, they'll just find someone hungrier. And hungrier isn't hard to find. If you do strike, there's no safety in numbers. The law is not on your side. The police don't come to protect you. They come to break you up, to drag you by the collar into a wagon, while you shout words no one will remember, to club you in the street while the newspaper calls it a necessary response to unrest. You might be jailed, you might be fined. You might be broken enough to stop speaking at all. And when it's over, if it ends, you'll be left with nothing. No job, no savings, no roof, just your cause and your regrets. Some try more organised rebellion. There are names for them: Luddites, Chartists, Radicals. Some break machines, some write pamphlets, some march with signs that say things like justice and bread. Most are ignored, some are hanged. The rest vanish into prisons where the walls are wet and the floor is straw, and the days blur together until you forget how many years they gave you. If you're lucky, you get out old and sick. If you're not, you don't get out at all. Even when change does come, and sometimes it does, it comes slow. Years too late. After too many deaths, after too many bodies buried in unmarked graves, a new law might limit your hours, or raise your wages, or promise you a lunch break. But by then, your lungs are already ruined. Your back is already crooked. Your children are already working, or dead. Reform is a gift given to the next generation, and even then, it's wrapped in loopholes and delay. The people who passed these laws aren't the ones who needed them. They're the ones who resisted them for as long as they could, but then claimed credit when public pressure made resistance inconvenient. They talk about progress and compromise as if they were ever the ones choking on coal dust or sewing through finger wounds. You listen to them speak on the steps of Parliament, and you wonder if they've ever seen a factory floor, if they'd last 10 minutes in your boots. Eventually, you stop trying, not out of defeat, out of necessity. Resistance is a young person's fire, and your fire burned out around the same time your hearing started to go. You go back to work, or what's left of it. You lower your head. You tell your children not to speak too loudly, not to draw attention. You tell yourself that things will change, just not now, just not for you. Because the truth is simple. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. The poor are kept poor, the tired are kept busy, the angry are kept scared. And when someone does manage to stand up, the ground beneath them gives way. You have no foundation, no power, just a voice, and even that has grown hoarse. So you whisper instead of shouting. You pray instead of demanding, and you keep breathing even when the air tastes like ash, because somewhere deep down, you're still waiting for someone to listen, even though no one ever has. You're 40, but your body doesn't know that. It thinks you're 80. It moves like you're 90. You creak when you stand, groan when you sit, and wince with every step in between. Your back doesn't straighten all the way anymore. Your knees grind when you walk. Your joints snap in protest every time you lift anything heavier than your own shame. You don't remember the last time you woke up without pain. At some point, you stopped noticing which aches were new. They all feel permanent now. Your teeth are mostly gone. Some rotted out, some cracked on stale bread. Some were pulled by someone who wasn't a dentist, but owned pliers and didn't flinch at the sound of screaming. What's left is jagged, unreliable, and mostly decorative. You eat slowly, carefully. You avoid meat when you can. You swallow more than you chew. Soup is a blessing. Porridge, if it's thin enough, is a miracle. You've learned to live with constant soreness in your jaw. And hunger, always hunger. Your hearing is faded. Your eyesight is worse. You squint in daylight and stumble in the dark. Your skin is a map of bruises, scars, burns and broken blood vessels. You don't remember how most of them got there. Your hands are twisted from years of cold and labour, not quite steady enough to sew anymore, not quite strong enough to lift coal, but still functional enough to sweep, carry, scrub. You find yourself blinking too slowly, breathing too shallowly, moving like your bones want to stay where they are, and let the world carry on without you. There is no retirement, no pension, no rest. You work until your body gives out. And then you work a little longer, because stopping means starving. If you're too slow, they notice. If you drop things, they notice. If you cough too often, limp too much, take too long to get up after falling, they notice. And then someone smaller, younger, cheaper appears behind you. Someone who doesn't know better yet. Someone who hasn't broken down. You get replaced, not all at once, just piece by piece. Fewer hours, less pay. Tasks that used to be yours handed off to someone else. Eventually, they stop calling your name. That's how you find out you're done. You don't go home and rest. You go home and fall into the same broken chair you've used for years. It doesn't hold your weight like it used to. Then again, neither does your spine. You nap during the day now, not because you want to, but because you can't help it. Sleep grabs you in short, heavy bursts, 10 minutes at a time, 20 if you're lucky. You wake up confused, heart racing, wondering if you missed something. You never did. Nothing changes. You're not the only one aging before your time. Everyone does. Your neighbours, your co-workers, your siblings. They all wear the same look now. That sunken-eyed, stiff-jointed exhaustion that belongs to people much older than their birthdays suggest. You try to remember what your parents looked like at this age. You realise they didn't make it this far. That thought doesn't scare you. It surprises you. You'd forgotten they were already gone. Young people pass you in the street and don't look twice. You used to be one of them. Now they move faster, laugh louder, and don't yet carry their grief in their posture. You envy them, but only a little. You know what's coming. They don't. You think about warning them, but what would you say? That time isn't what kills you. It's the work, the damp, the hunger, the endless strain of surviving a world that doesn't care if you do. They wouldn't listen. They'd look at your broken teeth and your bent hands and think it won't happen to them. It will. Your children, if you had any who lived, are grown now. Or nearly. They have jobs like yours, clothes like yours, lives like yours. You tried to give them more. You couldn't. The system took what little you had to offer and left them with the same. You don't talk about dreams anymore. You talk about wages, rent, illness. You watch them move through the same stages you did and hope, irrationally, that they'll escape, that maybe something will be different for them, but it won't. Not really. You don't have a legacy. You have objects, a tin cup, a coat with patches that your mother once wore, a chipped plate with a crack shaped like a tree branch. Maybe if someone remembers you kindly, they'll keep one of these. Maybe not. Maybe your name will be scrawled in chalk on a ledger somewhere, misspelled, half erased. Maybe your grave, if you get one, will have a marker, a bench if someone's feeling generous, misspelled again. But most likely, you'll vanish the way most do, quietly, completely, and without remark. You've outlived more people than you can count. Some you loved, some you barely knew, some you worked beside for years and only learned their names after they were gone. You think about them sometimes, how they disappeared, how easily they were replaced, how little space they took up in the end. You wonder how long it will take before someone forgets you just as easily. A week, a day, less. You're still here, still breathing, still waking up each morning in a body that no longer fits, in a world that no longer notices. You used to think survival meant something. Now you're not so sure. All you know is that you're tired in ways that sleep can't fix, and you still have to get up tomorrow. No one talks about the depression, not because it isn't there, but because it is, and talking about it would mean acknowledging something everyone's already drowning in. You don't call it that, of course. You don't have the word. You just feel it, the heaviness that doesn't go away. The mornings where your body gets up before your will to live catches up. The nights where you stare at the ceiling for hours. Eyes dry, mind loud. There are no doctors for this, no remedies. No one asks how you're feeling unless they're about to ask you for something. And if you answer honestly, they'll walk away. You carry grief like a second skin. Not the clean, cinematic kind, the long, sour kind. The kind that accumulates in layers over the years and doesn't leave. It settles into your joints, into the slope of your shoulders, into the way your voice trails off when you talk about someone who's gone. Everyone has someone who's gone. Most have several. Some are buried. Some just disappeared one day. Some still live 2 rooms away, but haven't spoken since the last child died. It's all the same. Absence is absence, whether it leaves a body behind or not. You don't cry openly. That's not how it works. Crying is something you do silently, at night, with your hand over your mouth, curled up facing the wall so no one sees. You cry when your stomach twists from the emptiness. You cry when the cold gets inside your bones. You cry when you remember something good and realise how far away it feels now. Sometimes you don't cry at all. Sometimes the feelings pile up so high they flatten you, and you just lie there, numb, staring at nothing. That's grief too, just quieter. There are no therapists, there are no journals, there are no long talks by candlelight about your hopes, your fears, your internal struggles. There's work, there's whiskey, there's sleep when you can get it. There's silence mostly, the kind that sits between people who've run out of energy to pretend. You see it in your parents, you see it in your neighbours, you see it in yourself. It's not apathy, it's not weakness, it's conservation. You only have so much to give, and most days giving anything to your own feelings feels like a waste. Some drink, some keep drinking. The bottle dulls the sharp edges, slows the thoughts down enough to sleep. It also makes people louder, crueler, or unreachable. You've seen men drink themselves into rage. You've seen women drink themselves into disappearance. You understand both. Some people stop talking altogether. Some never start again. You once knew a woman who stopped speaking after her 3rd child died. She lived another 20 years without saying a word. No one questioned it. No one blamed her. Children learn early what can and can't be said. They watch their parents collapse inward and mimic it. You've seen a 6-year-old wrap their arm around a crying sibling like they're the adult. You've heard a child say, "It's okay," in a tone that doesn't belong to children. There's no such thing as innocence here. Just smaller people, carrying smaller portions of the same grief. They age faster, emotionally. They grow quiet. They stop asking questions. You live among ghosts, not the kind that rattle chains or knock things from shelves, but the kind that fill the empty chairs and the gaps in conversation. The kind that linger in smells, in familiar shapes glimpsed from a distance, in dreams you don't want to describe because saying them out loud might make them disappear. You don't need stories about the afterlife. You're already living inside what feels like the waiting room for it. There's no cure for what you feel. No relief. Just endurance. You bear it because there's no other choice. Because life goes on, whether you're ready for it or not. Because no one else is going to carry your sorrow for you. You wear it like a coat, patching it when it tears, adjusting it when the fit changes. You don't talk about it. You don't have to. Everyone around you is wearing the same one. And so you keep moving, slow and quiet. You smile when you're supposed to. You nod when people speak. You hold hands at funerals, if there's time for one. And you keep your grief close, not because it's precious, but because it's familiar. Because it's the only thing that's never tried to leave you. History will call this progress. That's what they'll say. Decades from now, maybe a century, people will look back at this era and nod solemnly. A turning point, they'll call it. The dawn of modernity. They'll talk about steam engines and iron bridges, about textile booms and global trade, about the unstoppable march of industrialization. They'll use words like innovation and productivity and transformation. They'll marvel at the railways, the telegraphs, the factories stretching for miles, monuments to human ingenuity. They won't mention you. Your story won't make the history books. Not really. You might show up in a table somewhere, a number in a census, a casualty count in a public health report, a line in a footnote about working class mortality. They'll say the average life expectancy was tragically low. Then they'll turn the page and move on. You won't be a name or a voice or a moment. You'll be data. You'll be a grim statistic that's always followed by the word but. But look how far we came. But look what it led to. As if that makes it easier to swallow. They'll romanticize this age, dress it up in sepia tones. They'll write novels with soot-streaked heroes and plucky orphans who always find a way. They'll stage plays with corsets and candlelight, where factory floors look quaint and coal dust sparkles. They'll leave out the coughing, the rot, the silence, the shame. They'll admire the silhouettes of smokestacks against the skyline and never once consider what it felt like to breathe under them. They'll say it was necessary, that it had to happen this way, that the suffering was part of the process, a growing pain on the way to something better. They'll say you were a pioneer, that your generation laid the foundation for the modern world, that without you, they wouldn't have electric lights or indoor plumbing or 10-minute delivery. But they won't picture you. They won't picture the child curled up on a straw mattress, or the man coughing blood behind the mill, or the woman staring at a cradle that never needed to be built. They won't see the cost, just the outcome. Empires were built on your back, not metaphorically, literally. The roads, the rails, the ships, the machines, they ran on your sweat, your labour, your bones. Your hunger greased the gears of history. And when you broke, when your body finally gave out, there was always another one behind you, just as hungry, just as cheap, just as invisible. You were never irreplaceable. You were just convenient. They'll quote factory owners and economists, philosophers who praised the efficiency of the new era, politicians who promised that progress would lift all boats. They won't quote you. You didn't leave letters behind. You didn't write memoirs. You didn't have time. And even if you did, no one would have printed them. Paper cost too much, and your life wasn't considered worth recording. There are no archives for people like you, just basements, graves, gaps. Later generations will thank the inventors, the engineers, the visionaries. You'll be implied. The blurred background in the portraits, the small smudge on the timeline that historians skim past on the way to something grander. They'll thank men for their ideas, not the hands that brought those ideas to life, not the lungs that inhaled the fumes, not the fingers lost to spinning wheels, not the mothers who died giving birth to another round of labourers. They'll thank progress, but not its collateral. You'll hear people say it was worth it, that it had to happen, that without all this, the world wouldn't have electric lights or mass-produced clothing or steamships or steel. They'll look around at their modern conveniences and see them as miracles, not consequences. They won't think about what was burned to make the light bulb, what was broken to make the machine, what was buried to clear the path. That's not how history works. History counts winners. It doesn't count cost. Sometimes you'll hear them talk about resilience, about how inspiring it is that people survived all this, that you endured, as if endurance was a choice, as if you didn't do it because you had no other option, as if you wouldn't have gladly traded resilience for relief. They will call you strong, not because they admire you, but because it helps them forget they're still building systems on your bones. If there's a museum, you might end up in it. Not you, specifically, someone like you. A mannequin in a bonnet, a child's boot with a hole in the toe, a recreated tenement room that smells faintly of bleach and nostalgia. Visitors will walk through and say things like, "Can you imagine living like this?" And then they'll go home to running water and padded mattresses. They'll forget by dinner time. But for now, you're still here, still standing in the smog, still limping through shifts, still dragging your grief home in a sack slung over your shoulder like it's just another chore. And when you look around at the chimneys, the clamour, the rats, the ruin, you wonder, not for the first time, if this is what progress really looks like. If this is the future they dreamed of. If it was ever meant for people like you. Because maybe it was. Maybe this is exactly what they meant all along. And if it was, they got it. You die in a rented bed, or on the floor, or on a bench outside the factory gates, your coat pulled tight around a body that finally stopped listening. It's not dramatic. It's not tragic. It just happens. One moment you're here, the next you're not. No one makes a scene. No one stops the clock. There's no obituary, no photograph, no final words spoken in the right order. Someone checks your pulse. Someone shrugs. The space you left is needed by someone else by the end of the day. Your body is taken somewhere. A cart, a trench, a name misspelled on a slip of paper that blows away before it's filed. If you had family, they cry. Briefly, quietly, if at all. If you didn't, the process moves faster. There are more dead than time to bury them. Your belongings, the dented cup, the threadbare coat, the small box with cracked buttons, are packed into a bundle or thrown away. Someone else might take your shoes. Someone else might sleep in your spot. The room doesn't feel different without you. It just feels a little quieter. No one writes down what you did. There's no plaque, no marker. The things you built still stand. The bricks, the chimneys, the rails. But they don't remember you. They don't whisper your name when the wind moves through them. They don't hold your story in their foundations. You were a part of it all, but not in a way anyone will recognise. You were fuel, meant to be used, meant to burn. The fact that you lived at all is considered an acceptable cost. The machine doesn't pause, it doesn't stumble, it doesn't notice. Your shift is covered before you're cold. The wheel keeps turning, the soot keeps rising, and somewhere, someone else is showing up for their first day. Maybe they're younger than you were. Maybe they're stronger. It won't matter. They'll end up the same way. The system is efficient that way. It doesn't waste time on grief. It barely registers absence. You won't be remembered. Not by name, not by story. Maybe someone who loved you will say your name once in a while, quietly, as if testing whether it still means something. Maybe a child will ask who used to sit in that chair, and someone will say, "Oh, that was," and then stop, struggling to recall. Maybe they won't. Maybe you vanish entirely. Some people do. And yet, you are here. You lived. You breathed the smoke, swallowed the sorrow, bent your back to the weight of a world that never looked you in the eye. You were not celebrated, you were not spared, but you made it through until you didn't. You did everything you were told. You worked, you endured, you stayed quiet, and the world thanked you by forgetting you. Because you were never meant to survive this. You were just meant to fuel it. That brings us to the end of tonight's quiet collapse into a century that praised machines and forgot the hands that fed them. If you're still awake, thank you for making it through this slow unravelling of soot, silence, and the lives erased in the name of progress. If you'd like early access to more softly spoken histories, no one carved into marble, along with perks like ad-free audio of each episode, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which part would have broken you first. The factory, the famine, or the feeling that you never really mattered. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, a rating or review helps keep these forgotten stories breathing just a little longer. Sleep well.